So welcome to CANIE Climate Action Week. So we have our first session today is just a very informal networking session for our early career researchers, hosted by our wonderful CANIE Academic Advisory Board. Cool. All right, great start. Petulia Nakula, who is one of the co-founders of CANIE, and Robin Shields, who's based in Queensland, Australia. But I'll let them introduce themselves and the work of the Academic Advisory Board shortly. Just to give a brief overview of CANIE, for those who are maybe new to the work that we do. So founded in 2019, very much a volunteer-run organisation, not-for-profit, has a global board of about 17 board members from around the world. Hi, Elsa. And we also have regional chapters at the moment based in Europe, Americas and Oceania, and then a number of working groups focusing on different aspects of the work that CANIE does. And essentially, the vision is for a reimagined international education sector that reaches net zero emissions by 2030. You can find all of this information on our website, so I'm not going to go into huge detail now. And but just in terms of like recognition from the sector, I think it's important to know that our work's been getting a lot of traction. We were awarded the EAIE President's Award 2022. We have practitioners from about 750 different institutions around the world, an active membership of around 900 people across the globe, and more than 65 signatories to our CANIE Accord, which is a set of commitments that institutions can sign up to commit towards taking action around climate change within international education. And some of those signatories include NAFSA, EAIE, and Universitas 21. So all the information that you would ever want to know about CANIE, you can find on our website. You can also join to be a member. And this, obviously, you can have access to events like this, but also join the working groups, the regional chapters, and network, and address those hot topics surrounding climate action within international education today. So I'm going to hand over now to Petulia and Robin, and they will explain how this session is going to run and then give you a bit more of an overview around the work of the Academic Advisory Board. Over to you guys.
Great, thank you, Katie. Good to see everyone today. Nice to see you, Elsa. Welcome, Archie and JC. Is it Joanne? Or JC? We have quite a small and intimate group, which is great. So hopefully we can structure this more as a conversation where we just get to know each other. Archie and Joanne, I guess that depends how open you are to sharing and engaging in some conversation, or whether you'd like to hear about the Academic Advisory Board from us and have more of kind of a presentation to a small group. We're really lucky to have two giants of CANIE with us today. Elsa, great to see you, and Petulia as a member of the Academic Advisory Board. Petulia, do you want to say a bit about the AAB? I know you've got, I think you've got that prepared, right?
Yes, I can just give a brief introduction to the new Academic Advisory Board. So obviously we have only been part of CANIE for about 1 year now. CANIE is young, and the Academic Advisory Board is even younger. So I just have our other members here as well listed. So obviously Robin is part of it, and I'm also a member. And then we have a second session run tomorrow, which is led by Associate Professor Ann Campbell and Vinod Sasidhara from the US. We have also members based in Europe. So we have Professor Hong Yang and Frauke Urban, who is actually giving a keynote on sustainable aviation as well. And then we have members from South Africa. So some of you might probably know Dr. Savo Helata, who's quite active in this field. And then we have Dr. Mukofe Masutha as well. And our new student members is Thi Nguyen from the US as well. So you all know that the connection and intersection between international education and climate change is very interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary. So we need a lot of expertise from different fields. So again, here we, for example, have somebody who has expertise in climate science, so in the physical climate science, such as Professor Hong Yang, able to contribute to our work. We have people who have expertise in international education space, as well as in the intersection of international education and climate mitigation. We have people with expertise in sustainable aviation. We're not an island. What happens to us depends quite a lot on what's happening also outside. And then we have people who have expertise in sustainable management of organizations, education policy, as well as other aspects such as climate justice. So it's quite an interdisciplinary group. The Academic Advisory Board is an appointed body, so the CANIE Global Board makes appointments. And our role is to provide guidance and help when needed for the Global Board in terms of content development and other type of guidance as well. But we might start maybe, Robin, you want to talk a little bit of your research. Obviously, your research has informed a lot of the work of CANIE and is cited by academics and practitioners. So maybe you want to talk a little bit of some of the prior work and maybe some of your new research interests as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Petulia. So I'll talk. I do encourage a conversation. So Elsa and JC, if you've got anything to say at any point, just chime in. I think, like many people in this field, probably I started, I guess I was a beneficiary of international education. I had the opportunity to teach and work in Nepal for a few years after I did my undergraduate degree, and that was something that influenced me immensely. And so I came to CANIE, I suppose, as somebody who was interested in researching international education and globalization in education in particular. So the thing that initially kind of inspired a lot of my research is how educational systems and institutions around the world tend to converge and resemble one another more and more. So if you look at universities in different parts of the world, they're often dealing with very similar problems and talking in similar ways, perhaps adopting similar policies. And you see the same thing in how countries make policies about education. It often seems like they're reading from the same script. And so I wanted to know kind of, why is this so? What does this say about the world? And that was something that I investigated mainly by looking at kind of new forms of data about global education, whether it's data collected by international organizations or data that are generated through platforms like social media, but to see what new forms of data could tell us about globalization and education. And as I worked more in higher education, I particularly became aware that educational institutions are not apart from the world as we know it. They're a big part of it, and we're reliant on, or we're part of a lot of the problems that we see in the world, I suppose. And so climate change being one of the biggest problems that we're facing collectively as humanity, I became more aware that the work that I was doing was really kind of deeply implicated in climate change in lots of different ways. We educate students who go off and work in industries that are often part of the problems around climate change. And also, as people who work in universities, we're dependent upon a value chain which has a kind of its base, the use of fossil fuels and other unsustainable practices. And this particularly became obvious to me working in international areas where I would read more and more about how significant the impact of flying was on the climate, that when we fly, internationally on a long-haul flight, we're often releasing more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere than many people around the world do over a whole course of life for a year. So, to say that we're having a benefit is very easy to find the benefits and to point to the good things that come from our work, but we're not always as upfront about pointing out the harms that we cause and some of the negative impacts of our work. And I just kind of wanted to quantify this a little bit. So I've looked at data from UNESCO that tracks students moving around the world and use that to try just to kind of quantify how much of an impact do we have. And really, when you add it up, even using very conservative accounting, it's really substantial and actually comparable to, oh great, we've got someone else. Oh, we had someone else for a bit. Even comparable to whole countries. And so that's kind of how I've come to CANIE, and it's been great to see that some of this work's been cited in by CANIE and other researchers, which is great. I think moving forward, I'm really interested in questions of ethics and social justice, if we want to use that term, around, or maybe environmental justice or climate justice would be better. But how do we make decisions knowing that we do have an impact on the climate, but knowing that there's also a lot of good that comes out of our work? How do we try to balance these really two very different but very important considerations? What types of activities should we prioritize when we plan international education? What are some of the things that practices we might want to move away from? These are kind of the questions that interest me now, but I'll wrap up there and I'll hand it over to you, Tulia.
Yeah, and I also have an interest in those kind of tensions, and we see those tensions existing in different types of organizations, including, you know, having objectives in terms of wanting to be more inclusive, but then, you know, that inclusiveness, for example, in terms of study abroad, is going to have an environmental impact. So I think a lot of those questions are really current and important, and definitely something that don't necessarily have easy answers, I guess. So my work has been for more than 20 years been focused on the international education sector and questions to do about management and policy and regulation. And the climate lens has been arriving a little bit later, probably around 2018. I think I was just waiting for somebody else to do it, but then sometimes, you know, you have to say, no, you know, maybe it's your role to actually initiate that discussion. And obviously I was very lucky to be able to work with Elsa in thinking about how could we actually make the sector more aware of its climate impact as well. So I guess quite often in academia, we think that we do the research first and then we influence after. So I think for me, it was a little bit different. So I started from the influencing and impact, and then kind of moved more doing research in the field as well. So it might not have been as logical as we sometimes, you know, think the connection between research and impact is. So for me, really, I'm really interested in those tensions that organizations and industries have when they think about their climate impact, but also think about, for example, profitability, economic sustainability, social sustainability. And so how do you kind of decide, if you can't really find a win-win situation, how you're going to kind of manage and negotiate that tension, or a paradox sometimes even, that exists. And in a lot of my recent research, I've been also going kind of beyond in the international education sector and looking at businesses and other organizations and the drivers and barriers that exist when we think about climate mitigation, and doing some research on carbon accounting, emission trajectories, and climate disclosures. And recently I've been really interested in looking at this kind of science-based climate targets and what do they actually mean, and how do organizations actually show evidence that they're able to meet this kind of climate science-based targets as well, and hoping to kind of find applicability of a lot of that reporting that's happening outside, and maybe bringing it back to the international education sector again, to make sure that we also have kind of a robust framework to draw from. So that's some of my work. So our idea really for today was to have a discussion with those of you who are here today. We have a very small group about maybe some of your areas of interest, but also getting ideas for you and getting ideas from you about, potential topics that people could look at. So obviously we have people attending this session. Some are practitioners, some are researchers, and having a kind of more of a cross pollination of ideas as well. And what are some of the needs of the industry for research, and vice versa as well. So Elsa, you're here. So I think we all know you, but obviously you've been doing a lot of work moving away from CANIE as well, but staying in the same field. So are there some specific areas that kind of really you think we don't really have enough knowledge and evidence of, and that you think that would be worthwhile exploring?
Yeah, hi everyone, and hi JC. Please do feel free to join in the conversation. It's brilliant to hear what you've all been talking about there, and how far CANIE's come with the advisory academic board. It's just brilliant. As you mentioned, I've kind of moved away from CANIE, but still working in this field. And what we're focusing on now with the Climate Action Barometer is really kind of delving into what universities and pathway providers are doing. And so that's fantastic, because I had this idea of what I thought people were doing, but it's great to start being able to actually put some real kind of evidence around it. But as you're talking, I mean, one of the questions that we keep thinking about is, we don't actually have any real evidence about which actions have the most impact. And some of it's going to be really difficult to quantify. On the emissions reduction side, that's easier, and we're definitely kind of putting forward ideas for ways where you can try and achieve internationalization, still achieve those outcomes whilst reducing your carbon footprint. But for each individual step, like we really, we can make kind of recommendations, we can make judgments that we think are reasonable and have some justification, but we can't actually say, if you do this, this is how you reduce the harm. And so I suppose what I would love to see is some kind of more evidence-based decision-making framework for at least some of the actions that might help. And I love that phrase that you used there, Rob, and I'm going to steal it in future, about that international education is deeply implicated in climate change. That's sweet. So I suppose, I mean, we just have so many gaps still in our knowledge. Robin, you did that fantastic work, but looking at the carbon footprint of degree-seeking international students, we don't have that for study abroad, at least not that I'm aware of yet. One of the things that we've got, because we're now actually calculating the emissions to do with an institution's international education program overall, we don't have enough examples yet, but we're hoping that we will soon. We're going to have a special TNE working group, and we want to be able to say that these are the average emissions if you run your campuses offshore versus onshore. Here are, there might well be other factors to decide this, but if you're going to look at your operating model for running offshore campuses, these are the emissions you save if you have like locally engaged staff versus fly in, fly out model, all those types of things. So I suppose more work around that modeling of what emissions actually look like, so we can help people make decisions in advance. So there are a couple of the things that are kind of exercising me at the moment.
How do you think, because I'm just thinking in terms of some of the queries that I get, and it's often from, I mean, particularly you would know this because I usually forward them to you, is there are students out there who are interested in collaborating with CANIE or in some view of the research that they're doing, but I wonder how can we put out that these are the gaps that are needed, because students are always looking for relevant projects, and there's, I mean, and you can advise better on this, Petulia and Robin, but in terms of like funding that's available for whether it's a master's thesis or PhD, like how can we connect all of these things? Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can definitely have a look at how we could, use the CANIE maybe website to think about specific questions that, the practitioners say that need an answer as well. I think a lot of times, kind of the research interest expressions we get from students might not be exactly these type of questions, but they're a little bit more about teaching, and actually we need a lot of information about these exact questions. A lot of it is actually carbon accounting and looking at, organizational aspects as well. And obviously sometimes it might not align with the type of people who need a, do a project for maybe education or other purposes, that they actually do focus more on the teaching aspects as well. But yeah, so I mean, we could look at, and that's really our discussion as well for today, and tomorrow is about thinking about how we could kind of better explore and use this kind of collaborative approach to connect with people who might be interested in doing research in this field as well. But Robin, you might have better ideas of how to kind of pitch specific projects as well to people.
Yeah, I think those are good ideas. I'm aware, I don't know what you find, Petulia, and Elsa might also find the same, but there's quite a few people now doing research in this area. PhD students seem to be doing quite a bit on definitely climate change and higher education, and in some cases, international higher education and climate change. So there's a lot of people doing work in this space. I wonder if they're kind of connected to the types of needs that Elsa's identified. And I know Elsa, we spoke a couple last week about, how there might be opportunities for industry placements or students to do kind of engaged research where they're working with an organization like CANIE or like the Climate Action Barometer, where their work would kind of gain a little bit more traction because it would be embedded in some needs that people working in the field have. So that would be great if we could find ways to link PhD students to needs for knowledge in a way that would seem to benefit everyone. But I don't know if there's a great platform to do that. We could advertise, I guess, like CANIE's website and such, but and there are schemes in Australia. We have industry PhD awards for people who want to do kind of an industry-based PhD, and universities have additional funds that we get if students do a placement as part of their research. So if they're engaged with an organization. So tapping into some of these funding mechanisms might be a good way to get doctoral researchers kind of more engaged in the problems of organizations and institutions. But yeah, Elsa, the model sounds like a great thing, Elsa. That's kind of a good goal to work towards, where we'd have something where we could really say, if you do this, this is the impact. That would be nice.
Yeah. And it feels like we almost need a kind of like an online global brokerage system to gather people who are interested in doing research with, grants potentially, and also with people like us who've got ideas for where the gaps are. And I don't know, I mean, they're like on a localized level, we could probably try and pick up the conversation again with the IEAA research network. We did a few years ago, but I don't think it led to anything particularly tangible then. But really, we need it to be on a global level.
I mean, even targeting those new, especially some of these new degrees that are coming out. I mean, University of Waikato has its climate change degree, and they do include like an internship, but it's almost just getting it in front of those students who've already got the interest, who not all of them are going to go on to like research, but it's sort of sowing that seed. And I'm sure like there's ways of doing that.
Yeah, obviously,
because it's online.
Yeah, obviously for some of that modeling, it's going to be quite different depending on from which home country you're actually looking at it. So if your interest is more looking for Australia and transnational, then that's going to look quite different from, you know, UK and their kind of transnational delivery, also knowing the different modes that that exist and the many complexities that we'll have to do, even, you know, even modeling individual persons consumption based and travel based emissions. So yeah, but yeah, also there has been some research done on study abroad emissions of, for example, for the US that you might be interested in, and there's one in the book we published last year as well, that looks at US study abroad emission footprint as well, and obviously in Robin's paper you also you assess it based on some proxy data as well, but obviously we could do much more detailed calculations as well, and yeah, for Australia and New Zealand and other countries as well. But yeah, I also think a lot of the skills we need might be more yeah, so yeah, exactly, you know, as you say, you know, the people involved in some of those climate change programs, there might be quite a few who are more kind of from a policy and high level aspect,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
yeah, the needs I think we will increasingly need is more of that accounting skills needs. So it is a question of how do we actually engage people who have that kind of accounting knowledge and interest also in this field to bring their expertise and sustainability reporting overall, which, you know, doesn't really have a great framework for us to use, but obviously as part of the wider university and educational providers, yes, but for our specific subfield a little bit less so. Yeah. But yeah, it's a good question, and Elsa, yeah, I would like to obviously hear more of your reflections as well as you know, how you think about that that impact and how do we balance this, and you know, now we talk about the scope 4 as well and avoided emissions, and you know, how do we think about avoided emissions based on teaching our learners and then them potentially having more sustainable lives. So yeah, it's quite interesting area as well to apply to our field. JC, did you want to share any of your interests or ideas, or are you just listening today?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I am actually a student from the Eastern Institute of Technology, currently taking up Masters of Health Science. And I got interested in attending this session because I am actually currently working on my assessment, which is about climate change and its effects on children. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay. Are you on the Auckland campus or?
Yes, I'm in the
Yes.
Auckland campus.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, would be, I mean, and anything to do with health as well, as you know, it's completely relevant to our discussions when we think about you know, international students and climate change, and yeah, it would be great to see how we can engage more with people like you. We currently do have actually somebody from EIT who's our student member in the global board. And yeah, so you know, there's always opportunities to be engaged as well, yeah, in discussions.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm also actually really interested about climate change and its effects here in New Zealand and also in other countries. And if there's something that I can do to help combat this phenomenon and this problem.
Yeah, great.
Thanks, JC. Well, we're half an hour into the session. Obviously, it's an intimate group, so we can either. I do still want to share like the sponsorship info and some other follow-up. Obviously, we're recording this and it's going to go on the YouTube channel. So, did you want to wrap up the discussion, or do you feel like there's some more things you'd like to talk about? We're all good?
I think we're all good, yeah.
Yeah. So want to thank Robin and Petulia for really initiating these important types of discussions, and Elsa for the work that you're doing and really identifying those knowledge gaps, which I don't know, I just think somehow we need to be able to connect the dots and connect people like, motivated students like JC, into where the knowledge and the research is needed to really be able to help institutions create change. So thanks so much for your time today. And I no doubt we'll see you later on in the week. And I'm just going to share my screen and just follow up with some notes from our sponsors. So as we mentioned before, CANIE is very much volunteer-led and not-for-profit. And we've had some very kind sponsors that have helped sort of facilitate the organisation and coming together for all our speakers and all the logistics and everything behind the scenes for Climate Action Week. So I really want to thank the University of Tasmania. We're going to put all this information up on the website, and we're also going to share a post on our LinkedIn so we can really thank the sponsors. Also a video, very short video, I do believe I would like to play, around sustainability at the University of Tasmania, who's been our main sponsor for Climate Action Week.
How do I feel about the sustainability agenda? Passionate but impatient. As fast as we go, we've always got to be going faster. My colleagues are doing remarkable things, but every time we do a remarkable thing, I know we've got to do more because we have to solve this now.
The University of Tasmania has a very clear, holistic sustainability agenda. We have embedded it into our overall strategic plan for the university. It has its own framework for sustainability that encompasses 4 main areas of activity that are taken in all of our decision making and
projects we choose always deliver additional environmental and social benefits, for example, biodiversity protection or the creation of jobs for local community.
Oh, yeah. And